Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every other week to discuss a few of the places where we currently see grace and its absence playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. We're glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. God.
September is here, and the Mockingcast is too. I think it's been a few months, and judging by some of our technical difficulties we've had in figuring out how to record today, we're a little rusty. So, listeners, please be even extra forgiving as we sort of jump back on the horse. But what's going on? What did you do with your summer vacation?
Sarah, have you done anything this summer? You've had a very...
We moved, and we're still in process of moving. Like, I literally had to text Josh and be like, where's my new mic? And he's like, I think it's on the floor in the guest room. Everything's just kind of crazy, but we really love Nashville. We really love St. B's. I mean, I feel like, and RJ, you know this because you've done it recently, like, you can do all the interview process you want, but everybody's kind of showing their best selves, including you, and like you don't know
the honeymoon phase.
Yeah. Well, and even like when you get there, you're like, I don't know how this is gonna land, and it's just felt like such a like perfect, with all the human flaws that come with it, but perfect fit. So that's been like a real relief, because it's just such a risk of love for a church to call somebody, and a risk of love for somebody to like leave a church and go to a different one. So that's been really good. Yeah, it's been really good. I do want to say I'm coughing quite a bit still. You guys know this, but I got diagnosed with pretty severe asthma kind of all of a sudden. So I'm hoping that's going to be better by the next time we record, but it's kind of present for me. So yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry,
Sarah. That's
okay.
You have to give up smoking.
Yeah.
I know,
right? I know how you love it.
When I took the test, they asked me 3 times if I smoked. And I was like, do I tell them when I was 14 and at the water park? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
At the water park. Yeah.
That detail. So anyway,
You just lost your health insurance, Sarah.
Exactly. Right? Just like, it's gone.
That's it.
They're all listening. They're listening at all times.
They're listening at all times. So, yeah.
Well, for those of who are slightly unaware, when we say St. B's, it's St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church in Nashville. Yeah. And I know we have a lot of people in Nashville that are listening. Go check out that place.
Oh,
if I were there,
absolutely.
I mean, we have lots of friends who are doing ministry in that section of town, but hey, the new regime always needs some fresh encouragement, I think. That's so cool. I'm so glad to hear it's gone well, because you're right. There are times when you get there and you think, well, this is not as advertised.
Right, exactly. Yeah, totally. Or you're like, this is amazing.
Yeah, this is even better than you guys. Why didn't you guys put this in the brochure?
Right, right. Yeah,
they didn't know who they were dealing with. Well, so how and the kids in new schools and all that. How's that going?
Kids are in new schools. One kid is in a whole new school today after having started a new school 2 weeks ago. So, so we're living on the edge. So if you feel crazy right now as a mom who's super anxious about your kids, just remember, I'm a little crazier.
Wow.
So, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Just do all the change at once. Don't wait.
Just all the change.
Do not hesitate. That's right.
I mean, I did drop her off this morning, and she's totally my kid who would never do this, but she's like, I can do whatever I want today. It's my last day at this school. And I was like, oh my gosh, do something big. She won't, but
burn it down.
I know.
Wow. So. If I have to hear the phrase "kids are resilient" one more time, though,
I hate it.
I'm gonna die. I mean, I get it. I get it. They are resilient. I have 2 kids starting. 2 of my 3 are starting new. I've just started new schools, and praise God, it's gone well. It's gone better than expected. And yes, they are resilient, but.
Dude, they're not resilient. Like, I've been dying to write this piece. They're not resilient. They're just future therapy patients. Like, we just tell ourselves that because we want to feel okay about whatever havoc we're wreaking in their lives. Like, they're not resilient. They're not like, they're still human beings. Like, I hate hearing that.
Yeah. Well,
it's not a license to abuse them.
Speaking of, a pinnacle of resilience, RJ Heyman, how are you doing?
Ageless as ever, okay?
Mental, spiritual fortitude, Rutger Jan Heyman.
Today, this week, I'm doing well. We're adjusting to our own new normal of having only one child at home, which is a weird thing. The last time we only had one child at home, I was 28 years old, and we almost had another one coming. But now I'm 47, and Marshall, our 6-year-old, is going to be an only child for the next 11 or 12 years. But it's actually going really well. He's settling into school. Our 2 older boys are just so happy. Like, it's Jackson's senior year. He's got amazing friends. He loves school. Spencer just started at Rice a couple weeks ago.
Yay.
He loves it. I have to say, Sarah, Rice did a better job of welcoming him than any school I've ever seen or heard about. It was just crazy.
They're very good at that.
They knew his name. They knew what he liked. They loved him. It was just wonderful.
Glad.
So he's really happy. He does have COVID right now because apparently half the student body has COVID, but Rice doesn't really care. It's like, go to bed and see us in a few days. It's kind of over. But we're good. I think, honestly, Jamie was in a bit of mourning. She's probably still mourning a little bit. It's tough to see your kids go away and have them grow up, and just so many emotions, joy and pride and sadness and anticipation and just all these things. So a lot of emotions. But yeah, in general, we're doing really well and heading into another year, and excited, but also kind of overwhelmed about church stuff, as I think everyone this time of year, right, is feeling a little overwhelmed no matter what they do for a living.
Yeah.
But yeah, generally, we're doing good. And Dave, how are you?
Well, I'm a little like Sarah. I mean, although we didn't move towns, we did move houses. It was, I think I talked about it before we left, but since we last recorded this, I feel like my whole life's been sort of, transferred, 15 minutes down the road. And it's been, it's all the things they say. It's, exciting, it's fresh, but it's also a massive hassle to move and to do all of that. And we're kind of on the exciting side of it now, finally. Good. But I'd say, we moved on July 4th. It dominated my summer completely.
Yeah.
But, mainly, frankly, for me, it was a lot of the anxiety about the kids starting new schools. One of whom is happy-go-lucky as can be, and the other is just the opposite of that, whatever you would call that.
Yeah.
And so living kind of in anticipation of that for all of us in the house, it just kind of, settled over the house. But I can honestly, and we also have two of our kids' birthdays in 1 week at the end of the summer, which is always after you've made them move and they're going to new schools, then you have to kind of overcompensate, shall we say, on birthdays. Yeah. And so that's just happened. But, we're pinching ourselves that that it happened, that we did it, and it seems to be working out so far. And lots to give thanks for. We spent some time at the beach. We got to go to our favorite place up in North Michigan, which is just such a wonderful summer destination. Camp Arcadia. It was really another really stellar time there. And there's like RJ, like you, Sarah, there's just so much happening. I feel like as my kids entered the teenage years too, the amount of
buckle up
practices that we're ferrying people to just feels like it takes over your life.
I sent you that comedian who was like, you're basically an Amazon driver and your packages hate you. That's so accurate. Neil who has stuff every day because he signs up for everything, came home yesterday. He's like, I'm joining percussion club, and I'm like, why? What are we? But I'm like,
why not?
I mean, we're playing the trumpet, we're doing percussion. Yeah, yes. So anyway.
Yeah, Marshall's doing 4 different sports this fall. But luckily they're all 5 minutes away. So that's not so bad. Yeah.
Look, Marshall's at that age, you're the one who said it. You just got to run them. So.
Yeah, that's right. It's South Florida. It's like the sports capital of the world. So, scholarship, here we come.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, this first piece we're going to talk about is all about travel and vacation. This came out in the middle of the summer as a contrarian bit of writing in The New Yorker. Agnes Callard, who we've talked about before, she is a philosopher in Chicago, and she wrote something called The Case Against Travel. Now, I felt implicated, to be honest with you, but here's what she has to say. There's some things that are very interesting. She said, "What is the most uninformative statement that people are inclined to make about themselves? My nominee would be, quote, I love to travel. This tells you very little about a person because nearly everyone likes to travel, and yet people say it because for some reason they pride themselves both on having traveled and on the fact that they look forward to doing so. Travel gets branded as an achievement. See interesting places, have interesting experiences, become interesting people. But is that really what it is? She quotes a definition from a classic academic volume on tourism, saying, "A tourist is a temporarily leisured person who voluntarily visits a place away from home for the purpose of experiencing a change." That last phrase is crucial, for the sake of change. But what exactly gets changed? Then she talks about going to Paris and saying, like, during my Paris wanderings, I would stare at people, intently inspecting their clothing, their demeanor, their interactions. I was trying to see the Frenchness in the French people around me. This is not a way to make friends. And she talks about travel actually not as being a very good way of connecting with other human beings, because it's slightly dehumanizing. G.K. Chesterton talked about how travel makes you into a spectator, like you kind of view people as sort of objects in a zoo almost. But then she gets to her real problem with travel, and the real problem she has is with tourism, I think. She said, "A vacation is not like immigrating to a foreign country or matriculating at a university or starting a new job or falling in love. We embark on those pursuits with the trepidation of one who enters a tunnel not knowing who she will be when she walks out. The travel departs confident that she will come back with the same basic interests, political beliefs, and living arrangements. Travel is a boomerang. It drops you right where you started. And if you think this doesn't apply to you, cast your mind on any friends who set off on their summer adventures. In what condition do you expect to find them when they return? They may speak of their travel as though it was transformative or once in a lifetime, but will you be able to notice a difference in their behavior, their beliefs, or moral compass? Will there be any difference at all? Travel is fun, so it is not mysterious that we like it. What is mysterious is why we imbue it with a vast significance, an aura of virtue. One is forced to conclude that maybe it isn't so easy to do nothing. Imagine how your life would look if you discovered that you would never again travel. If you aren't planning a major life change, the prospect looms terrifyingly as, quote, more and more of this, and then I die. Travel splits this expanse of time into the chunk that happens before the trip and the chunk that happens after it, obscuring from view the certainty of annihilation.
Dave, are you okay? Like, I feel like that just made me sad to hear out loud. I can't. For the 3 listeners who are still with us, we're grateful for y'all. I just want to say that from the outset.
This made a lot of people were talking about this all summer.
Terrible.
I thought I was a bummer at cocktail parties. Like, I'm just like, this lady.
We can show you the vineyards of Tuscany, but we can't heal your marriage. Like, what was the Adam Sandler Saturday Night skit?
Totally. Yeah. Also, she's never been to Dollywood, clearly. Like, I come back different. This is like so sad. Also, like, tourism is like what keeps a lot of places going. Like, I don't know. Who is this? Like, is she okay? Is this a business check moment?
Read up on her. She's got a lot. She might not be okay. I don't know. I know that a lot of people saw this and thought it was worth talking about. All of her articles, I would say, do get you to think, and they get you these contrarian views that are sort of like, huh. If you are traveling to change you, I mean, that is what that great SNL thing that you're quoting, Romano Tours, with Adam Sandler.
So
I mean, that's what, if somehow travel is there to solve your problems or to turn you into a different person, then it will fail miserably. But I think she sort of undersells the idea of travel just as diversion, and people are interesting and places are beautiful, and just enjoying the beauty of it. She takes issue with the fact that people go to all these museums and they never go to a museum in their hometown, and so
how does she know that they don't go to museums in their hometown?
Sarah's having none of this. Well, tell us more.
I don't like it. Mm-hmm. No, I think travel is like it's changed our family in some ways. Like, it's where we've learned some of like our best lessons. Like, I was thinking about how we were on this like horrific, poorly planned by me ferry boat at like 2:00 in the morning when we were going into Canada, and I hadn't planned things well. And the kids were at each other, and we came up with the lamest game ever called the food game, where you 2 teams, you come up with a food, and then you just ask as many questions, yes or no, before you guess the food, right? That's literally the whole game.
That's a good game.
We've been playing it now for 6 years. We play it all the time. Like, we love it. Like, I'm like, does she not have children? Like, it's such a beautiful way to grow as a family. You know, I mean, RJ's kids have learned how to launch themselves off rocks.
Yeah, there's lots of cliff jumping. She clearly hasn't done any cliff jumping. Dollywood and cliff jumping is her issue.
Yeah, like, oh my gosh, Sarah, 100%. Like, we still talk about on one of our amazing road trips through like the Rockies when we lived in Texas, we stayed at this little state park in New Mexico called Elephant Butte. And we were awoken at like 6:30 in the morning by a hippie in a van, like playing like Enya music extremely loudly. And we always talk about like, remember elephant butt, remember elephant butt, you know? And yeah, Jamie saw some study a while ago that was sort of measuring adult happiness and saying that a big factor in adult happiness is how you remember your childhood. And a big factor in how you remember your childhood are the memories you make. And so many of the memories you make are on vacation, right? Like I don't go on vacation to get to know the people there. No. I go on vacation to get to know my family. Yeah. And those road trips we took where for like 2 weeks, we were either all in one car or one tent or one hotel room. And then we'd get home and everyone would retreat to their corners of the house. And you're like, where is everybody? I miss that. I miss that closeness. I miss those memories. And that's the thing she said at the end about, this is where Christianity, we're going to depart, that we can't handle annihilation and that we're nothing and we're going nowhere. Wrong. Yeah. No. Yeah. Like death is the ultimate travel experience. You know,
that is true.
We go to heaven to spend eternity doing amazing things in amazing places with the people we love. Oh, and also, if I stay home, all I do is worry about my work. Or like see the hedges that need to be trimmed, or the room that needs to be painted,
eat a whole bag of Cheetos.
Yeah, like there's you need to be shaken out of your routine every so often and go to somewhere where your phone is not ringing off the hook and you are not engaged in the relentless to-do list of day-to-day existence, you know? So like I am just this poor woman. Like, I just don't even know what to say.
Well, hey, sometimes it's fun to read an article that gets you guys going. This is I would say that like I feel the same way. I think like we realized that we travel was something we did well as a family, you know, and that we should do more of it because we enjoy each other more when we're on rather than when we're sort of in our separate corners and stuff like that. I also think, I mean, I was just thinking about this summer feeling like just the need occasionally just to get out of Dodge and a change of scenery that is yes, probably a little bit of trying to escape oneself, you know?
Duh, who doesn't want to do that?
But it's, I just can't help but think of sort of just the sort of being absorbed in the beauty and novelty of the world and on its offer. Sarah posted this thing the other day of a performance of a band called Nuns and Moses, which is like Sarah, I'm going to butcher this, but what I saw, what it looked like to me was a Guns N' Roses cover band where the guitarist is dressed as Moses the whole time, and there's a revolving door of nuns impersonating Axl Rose.
Rotating axles is
and I thought to myself, I would my original thought was like, you know, this is beautiful. Like the fact that human beings are capable of this, at least from my perspective and the stuff that I like, I'm like, the fact that this is out there makes me excited to wake up tomorrow morning.
Right?
You know?
Totally. I was like, this is like, I mean, I do like the empathy for her because it is like this feels like a really sad way to kind of.
Do you not have any friends? Like you're going somewhere else and you think you're going to make big friends on your, like maybe by some happy miracle you will meet somebody and that sounds incredible. But like that's not what.
Well, she was taking issue with the idea that you go to a place and there's a few things you have to do. People feel like there's true. Like you go to the Paris and you have to go to the Louvre, etc. And yet you don't actually have an interest in art. You feel like it's something you have to do and you're sort of checking the box. Maybe I'm speaking from the ivory tower here, but I don't know that many people that actually travel that way. Like it's, I
do. Are you kidding me?
God forbid you try something new.
Top 10 things to do in Kentucky. Like I'm on that list. I'm knocking them off. Like I just, I keep thinking about this summer, which again, hellacious moving. And I made that fatal mistake where I was like, oh, the kids have had camps all summer. We're just going to chill the last week. We had just moved in here.
No!
We were going to kill each other. And I looked at Josh and I said, I'm taking these kids to Dollywood. And he was like, sounds good. I mean, he had to work. And so we sat by the pool. We did Dollywood because they're not little from the morning to the evening. And it was
Drank bourbon.
Both my kids were like, by the pool because the pool is called a swimming hole and the drinks are called moonshine. So yes, we did. Thank you. And although it is like a beautiful resort, that's the language they use. I ate fried green tomatoes 3 times. We had the best time. And the kids were like, thank you. Like, they were literally like, thank you for getting us out of there. Like, we needed this. And I don't know. I wonder how she wakes up in the morning.
Well, it did get a lot of pushback, as you can imagine, from people that look forward to traveling. I was thinking about it, though, is that there is a certain breed of people that, you know, even though they have the means to travel, they like to do what's called a staycation. I personally don't have the capability of it. I can't, I need to sort of be removed from my surroundings. And maybe that's my own limitations or my own imagination. It just gets too overwhelmed by work or something. But, I need a change of scenery in order to kind of unwind. But I talk to people who can do a staycation, sabbatical or something like that. Or
hell no.
I always think to myself, that's a kind of a level of sanctification or spiritual enlightenment that I just don't have. Can you do a staycation? Have you ever done one?
No, I think those people are lying. What about you, RJ?
I can only do it if I have people that I love coming to visit me.
That's true.
like Jonathan Adams and his
true.
family will come down here, and he's great because we'll take a boat out, we'll go play golf, we'll hang out. If people are coming, because this actually is I live in a place where people come for vacation, which I often forget because I'm so in my own head. But then someone else comes and they want to do fun stuff, and I was sure. Then yes. But otherwise, if it's just our family, no, because we just do our thing and we're on our phones and we don't connect. And you know what I mean? As a family, we gotta go somewhere.
We haven't even mentioned the sort of spiritual idea of a pilgrimage, which I think there is something to that. Not just because I've spent years, jealous of Jacob Smith's walking of the Camino it seems like every other day. It makes me so I'm dying to do that one day. Jacob, we love you. Let's
get back to work.
Now get back to work. Stop walking. Let's move on to something else. This is from Sam Bush. This is on Mockingbird. It appeared sort of actually a month and a half ago, called Timing is Everything, The Ethics of Being Late. Now, Sam had watched a new Mike Birbiglia comedy special. And if you guys know Birbiglia, he's very funny. Sam writes, in comedian Mike Birbiglia's world, there are 2 types of people, those who are on time and those who are late. While he prides himself as being an on-time person, Birbiglia bemoans the fact that he married a member of the opposition. Quote, it's an issue, he admits. If they're heading out the door and his wife asks him to wait for her, he can't help but feel more allegiance to his on-time comrades. And then he says, what late people don't understand about us on-time people is that we hate you. The reason why we hate you is because it's so easy to be on time. All one needs to do to be on time, he argues, is to be early. In other words, one must have a more accurate understanding of reality. It will take you longer to get ready than you think. There will probably be traffic, and you probably will not catch every green light. And perhaps the humility also to realize that the world does not revolve around your airtight schedule. Sam goes on, he says, if blessed are those who never make another person wait, woe to those who show up late. To the perpetually tardy, the law of timeliness heaps accusation with every tick of the second hand. To be running late is both to regret the past, I should have left more cushion time, or dread the future, everyone is going to be mad at me. The relationship between on-time people and late people is proportional to the Pharisee and the publican. Like every other law in the hands of sinners, the righteousness or unrighteousness of promptness becomes an enemy of love. One need only observe the next time a coworker is 5 minutes behind for a staff meeting. There will be no sauntering, no triumphal entry. Rather, he will slink in, head bent low, tail between his legs, before mouthing a silent, sorry, while the rest of the room raises their eyebrows in mild indignation. Tardiness may not be a punishable offense, but that's not to say it is ever justified. As Birbiglia says, late people try to rebrand by saying, I'm fashionably late, which is, to me, like saying, I'm stylishly racist. It's funny. And then Sam pivots here, I think rightly so. He says, as much as we might be obsessed with timeliness, Jesus showed a shocking disregard for our veneration of Father Time. To him, it was impossible to be too late. To him, the laborers who show up late are still paid the same as the early risers. The thief who repents too late to save himself will still see paradise. And as Jesus was fond of saying, the first will be last and the last will be first. And for his part, Jesus repeatedly refused to be subjected to time. In fact, it's more the other way around. He mysteriously delays his ministry until he turns 30, an age that could be considered past one's prime. And once his ministry begins, he paces himself. He's not a slave to routine, nor does he bother to keep a calendar. He simply goes where the Spirit leads, always willing to drop what he's doing for the sake of someone else. Likewise, he expects others to do the same for him. Follow me, he says, without slowing his pace. From a worldly perspective, Jesus is hardly ever on schedule. Not once is he ever early.
I love this. I mean, I love it because I'm always late. Like, my kids know that about me. I'm also in one of these marriages where Josh is always on time and I'm always late. And in Houston, everyone was always a little late. And in Nashville, everyone is on time.
People were late in Houston?
I mean,
that was not my experience.
We were at different churches. Okay. but I would say that, like, here it's been interesting. Like, people are much more on time. And so I'm trying to adjust to that, but I loved all the examples biblically that he gave. The one that like immediately popped into my head, of course, is Lazarus, who like Jesus literally waited till he was dead, right? He was that late before he raised him. So yeah, it is an interesting thing because it's like a thing in our marriage. Even my kids will be like, "Oh, mom's always late." Like they just know. Like I'm not late to pick them up because I never want them to have that feeling. But like you're going to be a little late for soccer. Like this past weekend, Annie had a cross country meet, and y'all, she waited till after she finished to throw up all over herself. I was so proud of her.
Oh.
And no, all over her shoes. And then we went and got Sonic. But anyway, I literally had to like pull up to the track and be like, get out. Like, I mean, my kids do live that life with me a little bit. So, RJ, are you late or are you on time?
No, I
feel like you're very on time.
I'm pretty prompt. I mean,
yeah.
But in some ways I am, in some ways I'm not. Meetings, I really want to be there on time. I want to be there early. But when it comes to accomplishing tasks, I can tend to procrastinate a little bit, which I think is fed by my perfectionism, right? I'm always looking for like the perfect solution. So that rather than just getting it done, it has to be done in like the best possible way it can, which means I end up waiting. But at the same time, what I find in retrospect is that oftentimes things that I feel like I'm falling behind, I feel like I'm procrastinating, I feel like I'm late, they end up coming together in kind of perfect timing. You know, and actually, I can say you are one example, which, you know, we can cut this, but I've been stressing all summer about these 2 women's retreats we're supposed to have at Holy Trinity in November and January. And it's sort of been my task to find the speakers. And I'm like, who am I going to find? And then like a few days ago, I don't know, in the evening, I texted you and said, hey, you want to come talk? And you said, I'd love to. And then you recommended someone else. And I said, hey, you want to come talk? And she said, I'd love to, you know? And so it's like awesome. things I've been stressing out about for months and months. Just took 2 texts, and I would say in God's timing, right? Because if I texted you 2 months ago, you probably would have been like, I have absolutely no idea what is going on in my life.
Right.
So it just happened to be that God moved me to shoot those texts and ask those questions at the time they were meant to be done.
And I was in the midst of existential crisis about how I have no purpose right now. So
who am I? What am I doing? Where am I?
Perfect.
What am I
so
doing?
I reached out to you.
Yes.
And yes, exactly. So I do get those helpful reminders that, I may beat myself up about not doing things in a timely enough manner, but that God's not beating me up, and that things seem to get done when they're supposed to get done. And maybe I should just chill a little bit and enjoy my life and not feel constantly like I'm behind the 8 ball. And then I could enjoy a staycation. Yeah. You know, then maybe I could just, stay at home and enjoy my life.
Yeah. Do you guys think I'm on time or late?
Ooh, I feel like you're late.
I feel like you're on time.
I am usually about 5 minutes late.
Same.
Right.
Yes.
Yes. And like, honestly, it's one thing.
You guys are sinners.
Well, no, I don't know. Dave is sort of messing with us right now, but Enneagram 3s. I mean, if there's
here we go.
If there's the whole world revolves around me type, it's us.
Sarah, I'm an Enneagram 4. I think I've just discovered it definitively in all of the worst ways. I'm an Enneagram 4 with a 3 wing.
So. What am I again, Sarah? What am I?
I feel like you're a 6.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Well,
I think yours
I feel like you're the worst one.
whatever's
the worst one. Whatever the worst number is.
I remember unpacking it with a therapist a long time ago because it was driving the person I was working for absolutely crazy. And for me, it really came down to wanting to pack as much into my time as humanly possible. And for that, and it was actually a neurotic justification thing. Like I had to get so much done. If to waste time to me felt sinful. It felt that felt like an affront to almost to God, to the world, to life. And that's that's not a very good way to live. It's a terrible way to live, in fact. But because you start to sort of vilify rest and all this stuff. But for me, it kind of took untangling and say, this is why I continue to show up late, because I'm so enslaved to my to-do list or some internal tally of productivity that I have to kind of you have to take it out and look at it. And then it does help, I think, being married to someone who has to suffer your lateness all the time. And I actually married someone who's a little later than I am. But so I think when people invite us to places, I think it's at the point where they tell us to come 30 minutes earlier than they want us to be there.
Than everyone else at the party.
I'm pretty sure. And that's a different type of narcissism, right? I mean, the whole world's planning around you. But now I also feel, Sarah, with you, that my kids, there's one of my children, nothing is worse than showing up late because it draws attention to him. Yes. And for one doesn't care at all. One doesn't want us to be picked up late, but it's just like this cardinal sin. So it's the relationship we have with time is pretty complicated, actually.
And I mean, what you're saying is really true. Like once you have kids, it does, because they know they're always late, and then they'll tell you, and you're like, oh my God, we are always late. Like, I've got to get this together. We're always late for church, always, at least 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I used to tell myself that was like our ministry of presence, because other people would show up late and be like, oh, the priest family's late. But one thing I've observed in myself that I hate to admit is that, and part of it is right, like we're at a new church, and so I kind of, feeling worshipful is hard because I can feel more people sort of looking at me and being aware that I'm there. And, it's just, we haven't been there 10 years. We were at Holy Spirit for 10 years. And so then it's like the anxiety of being late and trying to get there, coupled with that anxiety, it probably takes me 25 minutes to actually settle into worship. So I hate to admit that, but I am trying to actually do better about that one thing. We're still going to be late for cross country, but church, I'm trying. So.
It's good. I mean, I'm happy to use Jesus as my justification for being late. I mean, I think it's thank you, Lord, that you did not keep a schedule, because that's about the only thing making me feel.
He's certainly taking his time coming back.
That's true.
I mean, my God, would you hurry it up already, please? As things are going to hell down here. Quick. And we need you to return post-haste.
We got you to show up.
I do remember going through a tough time and waiting for something to crack and someone saying God never shows up early, and thinking that's actually a very profound statement.
Yes.
And it can be of help to the person in the crisis. It may just be a retrospective thing, but there is something that jives with Scripture, certainly, of the way Jesus operated, but God never shows up early. Is just a different formulation of saying he never shows up late, but we want him to be early, don't we?
Well, and also the demand, you better be on time, because because I'm important. I have things to do. You better be on time. You're not that important. My schedule is very important. What I'm trying to accomplish is important.
Yeah.
But probably letting go of that a little bit is a sign of sanctification.
Well, you could say it seems like people are a little happier in the countries where the trains run a little late. I just could say that's
maybe a little late.
I have traveled enough to experience that aspect of life. The difference between Italy and Germany. But I do find, for example, in a church service, when I don't know when it's going to end, I get anxious. The fact that I can rely, and it's very important to the rector at our church that things end about 10:05 at the latest, so that people can rely on that and they can actually relax enough to worship.
Yes.
And I think
it's
that
missionally appropriate.
There's truth to that. But then you go to some other churches where it's just like, we're going to be here till the Spirit leads, and you're like, For me, that's I can kind of
You
appreciate
got
it.
an hour.
I can appreciate it academically, but in person, I kind of need to know. Well, speaking of slowing down, let's talk about. There's a long read in the Atlantic this month by David Brooks called "The New Old Age," and he's profiling the rise in post-career programs, like people who retire around age 60 and they go to like Stanford and Harvard and Notre Dame, and there's actually these are becoming more and more popular. Right now, it's sort of for CEOs trying to figure out their next chapter, but he's right to say, I think, that we're seeing an emerging new category of people. He writes, the idea of adolescence, as we now understand it, emerged over the course of the first half of the 20th century. In the 21st century, another new phase is developing between the career phase of life and senescence. People are living longer lives. If you are 60 right now, you have roughly a 50% chance of reaching 90. In other words, if you retire in your early to mid-60s, you can expect to have another 20 years before your mind and body begin their steepest decline. We don't yet have a good name for this life stage. Sarah Lawrence Lightfoot, a notable scholar in this area, calls it the third chapter. That's what I think my father calls it. I prefer the encore years. For many, it's a delightful and rewarding phase, but the transition into it can be rocky. For the participants in these programs that he talks to, who are largely upper middle class and well educated, their careers have defined their identities, their sense of significance derived from their professional achievements. What happens when all that goes away? One senior executive told me that he fears two things in life, retirement and death, and that he fears retirement more. The loss that comes with retirement can be brutal. Some highly successful people mourn the life that gave them meaning and made them the center of the room. They report feeling hollow, disoriented, empty. One 70-year-old told me that when she retired, she learned she's bad at predicting what will make her happy. Many of the activities she'd planned to pursue turned out to be dull or unfulfilling. He goes on to say, at an age when you think they'd be old enough to know the answers, these are people who find themselves thrown back into the fundamental questions of who am I, what's my purpose, what do I really want, do I really matter? And again, these are lessons of the super elite, but that do apply more broadly. Since the dawn of the modern age, people have been complaining about the hollowness of the rat race, but nobody ever does anything about it. If these post-professional programs can help older people figure out what a fulfilling life looks like when work and career are no longer in the center, then maybe they'll have some lessons for the rest of us. The emergence of a cohort of people who are still vital and energetic, but who are living by a different set of values, creating a different conception of the good life, might help the broader culture achieve a values reset. Most revolutions come from the young. Is it possible that the one we need now will be driven by the old? I'll stop there. I'll keep reading in a second. But are you guys? I'm seeing this for certain, and I think it is a very interesting emerging trend, especially if people are simply living longer. I'm fascinated by Brooks's sort of take on it because he says that you have people who are basically having panic attacks, asking the sort of questions of the inner life that they realize they've been sort of avoiding through their high functioning career. That we sort of, you can use that as a straw man in certain like sermons or talks about the religious life, but he's actually talking to a cohort of people for whom that's proven to be very much true. Veins popping out of their head because they don't want to think about who they really are or what they really want in life if their career's not an option.
Yeah. Or they just have a heart attack or become an alcoholic.
Yeah.
Which I've seen multiple times.
Over. Yeah. Over and over. Yeah. I sort of am just relating to this very deeply because I'm in a place where I don't know what's next and I'm trying to figure it out and I'm looking at programs that are different and I don't know that I'm going to end up, the opportunities for sort of ministry that's not running a church are pretty small here compared to where we were. And so, I know I mentioned education. The last time we talked, I'm still sort of exploring what that means. And I know the Barbie movie was unexpectedly political, but for a lot of people, it was not for me. I loved it. But all of the sort of heavy lessons in it aside, the thing that most struck me and was most moving to me and literally had me on the edge of the seat in that movie was when Barbie was like, she had decided she was going to be a human being and the people that she's living with are so like excited for her and they like take her to, Have you not seen it, RJ?
I haven't seen it yet. That's okay.
RJ.
Spoiler alert. So
That's
she
Spoiler.
decides you should see it. It's wonderful.
I know.
but
I'm dying to
it's
see it.
so
I just,
good.
yeah, it
That's
hasn't
on
happened
you,
yet.
bro. It's been out.
I know.
But
We're wearing pink, by the way, which, there you go.
With Dolly.
Oh,
So anyway,
pink Dolly sweatshirt.
She's with these people, and they're all like, "We're so excited for you today. This is going to be so great. We're so excited for you today." And it's this real sense of like Barbie's going to find her purpose. And when I tell you that I was on the edge of my seat, like whatever Barbie does, I'll just do that. Like that sounds good, because I'm just like, I'm in a place where it's like the world is so open, and also I'm 40, and what does that mean, and how does it mean to function? It's just crazy. And I know I need work for my mental health, above all. So then they drop her off at the gynecologist's office. And I'm like, for crying out loud, that's not helpful.
Yeah, but that was a brilliant
I get the
final line.
message.
It was a brilliant final line. That was you just really ruined it for some people. But that's...
You guys should, no, I did not ruin it for anybody. That is your responsibility. It's been out for way too long. So,
RJ, what were you about to say?
First I was going to say just how grateful I am for all the amazing retired people in my church.
Yeah.
Who are just so gifted and talented and lovely and diligent. And I just cannot imagine, I'm sure, Sarah, you feel the same way. Like the church would be a vastly different place if it weren't for people who have the time and resources to just serve and do it present, joyfully and to love others. And it's unbelievable. I do think, Jamie and I are definitely in the phase of our life where we've got 2 kids in college this year, and we have things to pay for, and it does kind of feel, I don't know, it's the rat race. It's just like the holding on a little bit, But we are going to get to the place where our kids are going to be out of college, and someday Marshall's going to go to college. I mean, maybe before Jesus comes back, but maybe not. It's going to be a while. And we were even talking last night, like one of the nice things about our profession is that when you retire, you actually can do some ministry still, but not in a way that carries with it a level of responsibility, and just thinking and dreaming like, what might we do in 15 or 20 years? And, it's kind of exciting to think about. But yeah, needing to have something to do, because I honestly have seen that. Guys who just like worked and then stopped working and sort of had a crisis.
Yeah.
Like what do I do? What do I do next? And you have to replace that kind of dopamine hit somehow, or just collapse. So yeah, I think it's encouraging. And I think it's also, this article might be something we talk about in our church, because I feel like it's happening, and people are always like, an older man of ministry Peter Moore, who I knew, who was the dean of my seminary for a while, used to talk about moving from success to significance. And that's kind of a trite way of putting it, but there's some truth to that. Right. And well, I don't know. What were you going to say?
No, it gets really profound, this article, because the answers that these folks are coming up with are unbelievably sort of just resonant with frankly, the Christian life. Susan Giannino, who is the CEO of an enormous advertising firm, she observes that in high-powered jobs, she took one of these courses, life is all about instrumentality and performance, about optimizing effort and delivering results. But you get to the stage beyond your work life, that mentality is not relevant. The key shift, she told me, is to go from mastery to servant. When you're in a high-powered work environment, you think of yourself as a master of performance, but to succeed in this new phase of life, she says, you have to serve. Some of these programs assign Heschel's book, The Sabbath, to get people to sort of slow down, stopping the busyness train. One writer says, if you want to go deeper into the heart's desire, you need to create the silence to hear it. Many of the alumni do get into sort of, programs designed to take on big social problems like school reform or homelessness. But Brooks says, I was entranced by people doing little things with great joy. One woman who had worked as a management professor at the University of Chicago for 60 years told me, I want to open a bakery. I don't want to run it. I just want to bake. Many of the students ultimately end up not missing their sparkling careers. In fact, they can't believe they allowed themselves to be stuck in those professional ruts for all those decades. Students in the middle of the program say, how did I miss this for so long? They are grieving They are grieving when they tell him, I should have done this earlier. Now, these are not people that they're actually choosing purpose over leisure. It's not just like relaxation. But Brooks concludes with, I think, what is the great indictment of this. He said, how on earth did we end up with a society in which 65-year-olds have to take courses to figure out who they are, what they really want, and what they should do next? How did we wind up with a culture in which people's veins pop out of their neck when they are forced to confront their inner lives? The answer is that we live in a culture that has become wildly imbalanced, like a bodybuilder who has pumped his right side up to excessive proportion while allowing his left side to shrivel away. Because there is a second and deeper logic to life, which is gift logic, which guides us as we form important relationships, serves those around us, and cultivate our full humanity. This is a logic of contribution, not acquisition, surrender, not domination. It's a moral logic, not an instrumental one, and it's full of paradox. You have to give to receive. You have to lose yourself to find yourself. You have to surrender to something outside yourself to gain strength within yourself. If career logic helps you conquer the world, gift logic helps you serve it.
I love this so much. I relate to this so much. I mean, I really do, because I do think that anyone who's had a long career that's been their whole lives and their whole existence and how they've defined themselves, it's a death when it's over. And, you know, I've said this here before, but it's definitely something that's still with me. Like, when my mom and dad died, my ambition disappeared. And it has not come back, and I don't think it's going to. And so the things that are very moving to me when I think about what my work would look like, right? And before they died, I was really on this trajectory where it was like, I could write more books, and I could hustle more, and I could speak at more churches, and I could, you know, do all these things. And now it's like the things that are moving to me for work are these like quiet ways of serving, period. Like being really present to little kids. Like, I can't explain it. Like, you know, being a hospice chaplain, like it's these quiet, almost unseen ways of working that are like much more appealing to me than anything ever was before.
I mean, I honestly think, though, when you bring up the church in relation to this, because yes, there is a side of the church that's just as careerist as anything, if not more so, because it's like kind of, it's got its own sort of pious justification scheme. But there is, this is an opportunity, and I think you see it. You see people sort of in their, it's kind of sometimes joked about how many people, you know, in retirement, they want to become ordained, but I think this is actually a beautiful way of saying, actually, this was the most important thing all along. And how can I just serve? I don't need to be the head of something. I just want to give back in some way. And the church is a place where these questions not only can be asked, but they can be sort of, you can be given opportunity to serve in a very powerful way that's so cognizant with the, they're so resonant with the core faith of the gospel. So I think it's an opportunity for the church. I think it's an opportunity that in the past maybe I haven't valued as much as I could, because certainly the retired people in our church are also some of the absolute saints. Because you do see when people leave their sort of working life or that second chapter, there are those that sort of shrink and those that expand, you know, the generosity, people who only become sort of fuller versions of themselves, and there's those that sort of like turn inward. You live with people long enough, you see that tendency, and I think that the service is the outward-looking thing that allows a person to kind of continue to grow. But I would, by the way, I'm sure this is the beginning of a book for him, David Brooks, but this article itself, there's so much in there, so many stories, and there's a lot of other things I haven't mentioned about it, but it is worth reading with those groups in your church, because it reframes these things as opportunities, not death sentences. And not only that, it's like almost like the most purposeful time of life in a culture that we are so full of the seculosity of career. Here you have this amazing invitation to serve. I think it's beautiful. I'll
be a little bit contrarian because I'm not a nice person.
I hate traveling. Yep.
No, I hate travel. It's the worst. I guess I'm not as surprised as David Brooks says he is that we live in a culture where 65-year-olds are asking themselves, like, what's the meaning of my life? Yeah. Because maybe I'm wrong, but it would seem to me that the history of human existence, and this is still probably true for most people in most places, is that people are just holding on. they're just trying to survive. Like life is hard and you got to feed your family and stay healthy. And the whole idea of retirement, like that's a very new idea. You know, people in Jesus' time, I don't think they retired. I think they grew up, they got married, they had kids, they worked, and they died.
Yeah.
You know, and that's it. So I'm not surprised by that. And I guess it also does make me think sometimes I do beat myself up for not enjoying my life more. You know, I'm like, what is it about me that I can't just seem to enjoy my life, that I have to sort of be caring all the time and working all the time and thinking about other people all the time, and just like, I love what I do, but it's exhausting, you know? And then the thought occurs to me is like, maybe that's not what this life is about. You know, like this is not the end. This is not the end, right? There is something more, and maybe we all, and within reason, like I don't want to become some super pious, holier than thou, miserable Christian who hates their life and is just looking forward to heaven or something. That's not what I'm talking about. But then maybe this retirement, they're kind of practicing for heaven a little bit, right? Isn't that going to be the whole question of heaven? Like, what are we going to do when we don't have to do anything? And that's the whole question of life. And yet we are called to serve. We're called to serve and to spread the good news and to love others in Jesus' name. And you know, if you're finding yourself unhappy or stressed out sometimes, like, welcome to human existence. And there have not been that many people in the history of the world who are financially independent enough to be able to say, you know, I don't have to do anything. I can just kind of do what I want. That's kind of a new problem, isn't it, in the history of the world?
Totally.
Except for
Totally
So I'm not at all surprised.
Yeah,
like I feel like most people just don't have the time or the energy to deal with those questions.
Right.
It didn't even really maybe occur to them.
Right.
Maybe, I don't know. I'm not a historian, but that's how it strikes me.
Well, I was thinking about one of the huge cultural phenomenons of the summer. That's not Barbie, but is also sort of slightly nostalgic in a way, is the Taylor Swift's Eras tour. And because, I mean, I say it's nostalgic because she's playing all the sort of songs people remember from their adolescence. She's taking you on a journey. And I think about when it comes to Taylor, I'm always asking myself, what is it that makes her so popular? Like that, you know, there's a lot of popular people out there, a lot of gifted songwriters. Why is it so many young women especially feel like they have this unique, deep connection with her? Like it's unbelievable. And I think to myself, she does scratch a little bit of people. You can respect her as sort of from like the girl boss side of things. Like she's done things her own way. She's reclaiming her music. She's done this. But if you listen to her music, she's never singing about career. She's never singing. She sings about relationships and the inner life and matters of the heart. Always. I mean, almost to an extent. They're her concerts. I've watched all the footage because I happen to enjoy her music a lot too. There are these rituals of catharsis of people crying and tears, and it's all about breakups and getting together and yearning and relationships and being known and being confused and stuff like that. And I always,
and how much she hates John Mayer. Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of anger at men in those shows for sure, but the deeper things going on in life, or what it strikes me is that if we're not able to vent or to explore the kind of the emotional, spiritual side of life, it will come out via, you know, we'll be paying $3,000 for a nosebleed ticket so that we can have some sort of inner experience of these things that are not all politicized or telling you that the only thing that matters in life is the career you get.
You guys can address your letters to Dave Ball.
A man commenting about Taylor Swift? Is that?
No, I think it's interesting. I'm actually not a Taylor Swift fan, but I know the lifestyle of the Swifties, and it's an interesting thing. Like the idea of like catharsis and purpose, right? That people, especially young women, find in her music. And we could do a whole thing about Taylor Swift because I was fascinated to work with college students, and those girls love Taylor Swift because, you know, I'm a little old to have sort of grown up on her music, but they all did. And I think there's bigger questions, you know, having worked with college students, that those young women are asking about relationships and marriage and planning their lives. That, you know, is kind of in some ways, RJ, to your point, and also a new crisis point, right? That wasn't always questions that 22-year-old women ask themselves, and that she kind of maybe gives a way into that, which is interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's what I was trying to say. Like, there's lots of talk about how you can get the next job, but there's the real stuff of life is so confusing.
Yeah.
Isn't it almost like when you talk about Taylor Swift conferences, and I know what you mean, that we're
Conferences?
put in a
I
Christian
love that you called it a conference.
conferences. Sorry, concerts.
I mean,
Concerts.
RJ,
Sorry,
it's literally a conference. It is.
It is.
Yeah. You exchange
But we're
things,
looking
bracelets. It's a whole thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like what we're looking for in Christian language are like signs of the kingdom, right? We know we live in this difficult world and it's hard, and we're just looking for glimpses that there's some, and we know it, we feel it in our heart, and we're seeking it out just to be reminded that there's more, and that something beyond this, and whether it's, and I think, and sometimes those moments happen in church. That's what you hope that even coming to church is a sign of the kingdom, or at least part of it is, or it happens often enough. But that's what we're looking for, that we're not alone, we're loved. I think you're right, Dave. Cathartic experience, because Jesus didn't heal everybody. He performed some miracles, but the miracles he performed, I feel like, were signs of who he was, and signs that this was not all there was, and that there would be full healing someday, and full restoration, and full love. And we don't experience that a whole lot here, but we need to know. We need to know that there's something more.
Like, if people are trying to come up with a sermon, the idea of looking for signs of the kingdom, it's just like, that's so true. Like, and it makes me, I just pulled this up because it's like maybe my favorite Capon quote. It's, why do we marry? Why take friends and lovers? Why give ourselves to music, painting, chemistry, or cooking? Out of simple delight in the resident goodness of creation, of course, but out of more than that too. Half Earth's gorgeousness lies hidden in the glimpsed city it longs to become. So good.
Yeah, there's when I was at Michigan, my friend Ryan Tinetti spoke about the feeling of being a castaway, longing for home, and you see, sometimes I think we've talked about how is this behavior or phenomenon, how is it maybe it's something we find alienating. We ask, how is it a cry for help? You could also look at these enormous cultural, big tent moments as like, how is this a cry for home? How is it a cry for home? How do people want home?
Yes.
And I think that's why I just always, whenever something's that big and tapping into that deep a vein, you have something spiritual's going on. There has to be.
Absolutely.
And you can either sort of judge it, or you can sort of say, well, maybe the church isn't as irrelevant as we thought. Maybe people are still dying for some hope, to be seen, to feel like they matter,
and some sort of transcendent experience. But that also, it is and it isn't, right? It's beyond you, but it's embedded in your heart. It's like something that you it's out there and you can't quite name it, but it's so embedded in you, and that's the moment of catharsis, right? Where the abreactive moment, you're like, oh my God, like something is happening here, and I feel opened up.
Yeah, it's abreaction,
and sort of exposed and seen and loved, kind of all at the same time. And this is what I want.
Well, let's end with a moment of supreme sort of a glimpse of the kingdom. And this is from, Mockingbird, our magazine. We published the Mercy issue. It came out about 2 weeks ago, and it's, I think, the most beautiful cover we've probably ever published.
Agreed. It's unbelievable.
Incredible.
People are cutting it out and framing it.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's worth that. And there's all these stories of mercy in there. It's just phenomenal. If you're not subscribed, you should be. But there's a testimony in there by an article by a woman named Diane Collard. It's called "When the Words Become True." Now, Diane was a woman who, she and her husband were missionaries in Europe, and they received word that their son had died. In fact, that he'd been killed, he'd been murdered, and he was trying to help a coworker and this coworker's husband thought that they were having an affair, and there was it was a whole thing, and he was proven he was just. When the truth finally came out, Tim was his name. Tim was a friend with a listening ear at the wrong place and at the wrong time. He was killed in a gruesome manner. You can read about it. It's on the website now, as well as in the magazine. She writes this as a mother. She said, "Of course, all murder is senseless, but the murder of my dear son was absolutely without any justification. The following months of grief, the waves of pain, were accompanied by perennial questions that demanded answers. Why did God allow this to happen? Where is the hope we need to go on living? Is God good? Today, I can unequivocally declare, yes, God is good, even in the midst of a life that is unfair. I've surrendered the question of why to a new question. God, what can you do to both glorify yourself and to heal others through this horrible situation? Yet in those first weeks following Tim's death, when the despair of grief overwhelmed me, I knew that if I did not have God's care, compassion, and strength, I would not survive. I could not go on living. There was a stark realization that without God, I could not handle the grief. And the one question that haunted me was, could God really expect me to forgive and to show mercy to the murderer of my child? She says, as a young girl, I had trusted in Christ as my Savior and knew that God had forgiven me, that I was completely accepted as a child of God and did not have to earn his love. I learned of the depths of God's mercy as I read in the scriptures about Christ hanging on a cross, crying out, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And I had experienced that mercy when I embraced his forgiveness for myself. And still, how could I forgive this man who had brutally taken my son and hurt my family so deeply? For me, and she goes through the scriptures surrounding it, and she sort of comes to the conclusion that something about she wants to forgive or to show mercy to this man as a matter of her faith in a forgiving God. She said, the most powerful aspect of forgiveness was the realization that I must choose by the power of the Holy Spirit to live with the consequences of another person's sin. This is what Christ did for me on the cross. It is what God teaches me to do towards others. It is forgiving as God in Christ has forgiven me. This was the deep expression of mercy that is the characteristic of life in God's kingdom. Over time, God showed me how simple acts of forgiveness would bless this man and would increase my freedom from anger and bitterness. I realized the murderer and I were both on a pilgrimage of mercy. The initial act of forgiveness was to pray for my son's murderer by name. I'd never uttered his name because he had become a monster in my mind. But when I started praying for Mike, he became a man, one whom God loved and for whom Christ died. Eventually, when this man responded to God's offer of mercy and forgiveness, this man became my brother in Christ. We worked to have him released from prison. And as impossible as it sounds, I can honestly say, I love the murderer of my child. This is only through the mercy and love of God. I truly wonder if I could have ever understood and delighted in God's mercy for me without experiencing what it took for me to forgive the killer of my child. I am far more aware of the cost of God's forgiveness and his love for me now that I have learned to express mercy, and as a result, have been blessed with love, grace, and freedom. It was not a lesson I would have chosen, but I am so grateful for what God has taught me.
So, I mean,
It's crazy.
this is so good. There's so many lines that I love that I've surrendered the question of why is so powerful. And like, I can totally identify with that. It does make me think though of the other stuff we've been talking about, just that, you know, it's an interesting thing to talk about service for us, right? Because one thing that we often talk about is not earning. I mean, is the thing. We don't earn God's grace. Like, it's given to us. And then there's a whole sort of way of thinking within the church and then also within culture that it's like, you have to volunteer more and you have to serve more and you have to fix societal problems and, and you kind of feel the weight of that. And like, what I would say is you actually can't do any of that without being miserable until something's died. Your heart's not soft enough. Like, I think I'm thinking this through, but it's almost like when we are younger, for example, when I was in seminary and there was such a clarion call of like, the only way to be a Christian, the only way to be a minister is to, have an urban garden and to like fix the issue of like the medical system, right? And I was like 25 and pregnant with my first kid and was like, take a day off. And it didn't work for me, right? It doesn't make sense actually, because we're just in life before death. But once death happens, once someone dies in your life, once you go to prison, once you retire, it's like there's something about a softening that happens in your life. And then you're actually able to say, what are these small, quiet problems in my life or in culture or with people who I love that I can be attentive to? And you're not forcing yourself. It's not your will, right? It's just that death has caused a great softening. And I feel fortunate enough, and I'm so glad to hear this from her, to be one of those people that's what death, I know that death doesn't do that to everyone, right? I know that, but I'd so identify with her talking about the praying and like leaning on God in those weeks afterwards, because, I never knew God was that there for me. I totally relate to this. Anyway.
Suffering is how God makes us more like Jesus.
Yeah.
There's no question.
Yeah.
There's no question. Tim Keller's funeral was a couple weeks ago. I haven't watched it. I didn't watch it. I know. I mean, first of all, I love the fact that it was at St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Cathedral. And like how it just, that's so great.
Yeah.
So beautiful, right? To have a moment of kind of, I don't know, unity in Christ. But there was some quote, I think he actually wrote part of what was said at his funeral, which just seems like the most Tim Keller thing in the world, to like write your own eulogy or whatever. But I heard he said something like, there's nothing so awful that can ever happen to you that God can't use it for good. You know? And that seems like an easy thing to say, and it seems sort of scandalous too. It's like, what do you mean? Of course, you don't know what's happened to me. But then you see this woman, and it's tough to imagine a more awful thing than your child being senselessly murdered. And yet, to see how it's been used for good in her life, in the murderer's life, now in our lives, it's just how God works. It's just the craziest thing. And it's the only hope in the midst of life's uncontrollable insanity.
Someone forwarded me a meme from Lady Gaga, which I thought kind of captures a little bit of what you guys are saying. She wrote, God said to me, I am going to show you pain. And then you are going to help other people who are in pain because you understand it. Now that is a meme, and I know it could sound a little trite, but you know, Diane Collard's experience is not trite. And I think it's the opposite of it. And what a hope it gives us for those in the middle of like the little deaths. And the mercy that, the title of that essay is When the Words Become True. And the words that she'd heard her whole life about how merciful God was, and what the cross, the suffering for our sake, and for those he loves, and the bearing the sins of the world. She says in other places there that these words finally became true to her in a way that she doesn't know how else they could have been. And she stopped asking the why question, as you said, Sarah. It's not a theodicy essay.
Right.
It's simply about the testimony. It's like, I don't know why. This is terrible. Right. There's nothing that can mitigate the horribleness of this. And yet, however, here I am testifying to God's mercy in a way that is beyond me, and that I'm willing to tell the whole world about. I mean, that's to me, that's as hopeful and as countercultural as it gets. I just love it. I thought it was a good way to end our first episode back after hiatus.
Nice and light.
Nice and light. From travel to punctuality to old age to Taylor Swift to,
forgiving your son's murder.
Grace.
Yeah.
Well, you two, I guess we'll talk in a couple weeks, but I just pray for mercy for you as the beginning of this year, the tumult begins, because it feels like that to me. It feels like a mighty storm about to roll in.
It does.
But, and all those of you who are listening, we're just so grateful that you for your continued interest, and please be in touch with us if you have anything that you want to say, except about Taylor Swift. We will not be.
We will not be responding.
No think pieces.
No, thank you.
All right, you guys. Bye now.
All right.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mocking Cast is provided by TJ Hester. And if you like what you've heard, please drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating or review. Until next time.